Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special luncheon of the Austin and San Antonio chapter of ACG. My name's Tom Singer. I'm a member of the Austin San Antonio chapter, and I have the honor to kind of kick today's meeting off. We're going to try to do a lot more of these online virtual events because we still aren't in a position where we can come back to live meetings, although ACG, we're working to get there, but we're just not there yet. But we want to make sure that we're providing really good content to you. So we're going to start doing more of these online meetings that take the place of the luncheons for the time being, but we're going to be back together in person as soon as we're able to do that. So before we get started, I'd like to thank our chapter sponsors because we couldn't do any of the things that ACG does between the great information and content, our awards, and the networking that we provide if it wasn't for the sponsors. So our sponsors are Weaver, Insperity, Dykma, and Hire Better. Thank you so much to all of them for everything that they do to make this chapter run. So today I am really excited because today we have Tom Cuthbert. And Tom he's an entrepreneur. He has bought and sold companies for over 30 years. And his most recent company was purchased by Google. He now spends most of his time consulting with CEOs and coaching CEOs, about 1,000 hours per year that he is doing that. So I'm going to turn this over to him. Tom, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it. It's great to be with you guys today and want to take a few minutes and share some of the things that I've both learned over my 35 years in business and also over the last year, 8 or 9 months now at least, navigating this crisis that we've been in through the eyes and ears and minds of the CEOs that I work with. I work with about 60 CEOs here in San Antonio, and as Tom mentioned, I spend about 1,000 hours a year listening to them mostly. And we've all had a very difficult year. It's impacted us in many different ways. And so I thought it'd be useful for us today to maybe take a few minutes and look at the crisis, look at where we are, and then some ideas perhaps to help you accelerate growth in your business towards sustained growth, which is what we all want to achieve. I wrote an article back in April for the San Antonio Business Journal about the stages of the pandemic, the stages of the crisis that we were in. And it's really important that you take a few minutes and think about where you are in these stages. There's stages that I'll step through today, and so I'd like for you to just kind of think about where you are and think about what could you be doing to move to that next stage and get towards the sustained growth stage in that. That is the first step for you, is really take time as you listen to this and drop a pin where you are, where you think you and your company are today. Secondly, begin to take immediate action. There's no time to pause for us as we not only have navigated the crisis, some of us are still navigating the crisis, but many of us are beginning to emerge from that and moving on to those next stages. So I want to really encourage you to take immediate action once you know what that direction is. And then the third thing is moving towards recovery. Being in crisis is basically trying to stay where you are. We want companies to move and grow and accelerate coming out of the crisis into a better recovery. So what's stage one? Stage one, back when this hit us in February, early March, maybe April for you, depending on where you are and the type of business that you're in. Stage one was survival. This came out of nowhere for most of us. We were in situations where a lot of our member companies, devastated revenue just stopped coming in, locations closed, offices closed, people having to immediately work remotely. So the things that our members focused on in that stage are making cuts, obviously doing layoffs, making some very, very difficult decisions. Contract review, cash management, going back on leases, all of these things are internally focused. They literally are focused around how do I survive not knowing what's coming in April, May, June, and beyond. Once they moved from the survival mode, taking care of the internal things, they began to think about their customers, their partners, and lift their head up and look around them. So staying where we are, I always tell our members, staying where you are, trying to stay where you are is the most dangerous place to be. You want to try to move forward at all times in business, and I know that's what your organization is about, moving forward. So we encouraged members at this time to engage their clients. What do they need? What are new things that they need? Begin to slow the revenue decline by finding new ways to generate revenue or recover some of the revenue that was lost in that survival stage. SBA loans, obviously the PPP loans, preserving cash, getting lines of credit. this was the stage where if you didn't know your banker, but honestly, more importantly, your banker didn't know you, that was a bad situation. Key relationship for us, not only then, but now as well. Moving out of the focus on customers now moves towards more of retention. It's very expensive to acquire new clients, new customers in any business. And so retaining the ones we have has been a focus. Many of our companies kind of hit this stage around May, June, July, depending on where we were. The focus is, how do I retain as many clients as I have? And you do that in any way possible. You could maybe offer discounts or incentives to stay with them. You could create new lines of business, new services, new products that might help them kind of meet the needs of where they are. But in the retention stage, it's critical for us to take our mind as a CEO and go to the mind of our clients and our partners and see what those needs are. Make sure you're working cohesively with them to begin to lay a foundation to move the business forward. Coming out of retention is really when a business owner lifts their head up and truly looks around and sees that in the midst of this crazy red ocean that we're in, there's a blue ocean available for us. Now, for many of us, those are new products and services that we've never been in before. But I have to tell you, this is my 6th downturn over what's now, hate to say it, 40-year business career. During that time, every downturn creates opportunities, and the best opportunities come from about the time that the downturn is stabilizing and slowing. It's that following 18 months. And so we've been working really hard since about June and July on explore and test. What are new opportunities? What are blue oceans that you could swim into? Test ideas with clients, do focus groups, get feedback. Talk to your partners about new services and way you can work together. Clearly differentiate yourself and articulate the vision for your team so your people know where you're going and they can be fully focused on that and help you get there. This stage can be enhanced by the Blue Ocean strategy. In fact, I'll give you a link at the end of this presentation that has additional resources about this recovery stage and specifically Blue Ocean strategy and the way that we view it and the way that another author that we've worked with has helped us understand this marketplace. Lift your head up, look around, see what opportunities are there, and begin to swim into those blue oceans. As part of that process, you're now going to start planning and investing. Once you see opportunities to go and grow into, figure out how to get there, map those plans out. I have to tell you, the sales playbook that you have, the marketing playbook that you have, and certainly your goals for 2020 are all out the window. We need to rebuild all of those, and this is the stage when that's critical to do so. Launch new products, take business from competitors, track with KPIs to keep yourself moving in the right direction. Once you get those things in place, now is the time to accelerate and capture. I have a number of member companies that have taken the summer to develop those strategies and find those blue oceans and are now investing and accelerating into that to capture new market share. They're hiring people again. They're investing in technology. They're investing in training and support, ways to make their business run at a faster pace. They're going from 1 step to 2 to 3 to 5. They're moving quickly, trying to really create this traction and a flywheel approach of growth and acceleration. Invest, adapt, make changes. Invest, adapt, make changes. Keep moving forward. Then we reach where we want to be, sustaining growth. Sustaining growth is repeatable and scalable growth inside your company. It can happen at the time that we're in right now. As unpredictable as everything is, it's certainly not impossible for us to find, identify, and move into new markets, new opportunities, new products and services that can grow and be repeated as scalable parts of our business. ROI is the critical measure for any investment. So track and measure your progress on this and measure your growth. I like to use 12-month moving totals. And you know, we look at those in our group meetings with the CEOs that I work with and my individual conversations. They're all kind of tanked, obviously, for many companies through this pandemic. Now is the time when you begin to track that. You can see real sustained and measured growth. Refine and tweak, explore new opportunities, figure out what's working, experiment and accept that not everything will, and learn and learn and learn and learn and grow. That mindset of, I'm not going to get stuck in the mud. I'm not going to have my feet stuck where I am. I'm not going to stay where I am. I'm going to move forward and find new ways to do that is how you're going to achieve sustained growth. So I want to strongly encourage you to look at where you are. Which of these stages are you in now? I'm happy to answer any questions about that here in a few minutes with Tom. But think about these stages and where you are. What are the next steps to move you to that next stage so that we can get to that point of sustained growth? There's 10 things I would share with you quickly as we kind of wrap this brief session up this morning. The first one, and these are things that I've been telling our CEOs for the last several months. Now is the time to lead. As a CEO, you're always the leader, but this has been a crisis for many companies. It's not the time to lean on others. It's not the time to stay in the same place. It's not the time to be passive. It's the time to be assertive and aggressive and be the leader that your team, your partners, and most importantly, your customers need you to be. Secondly, over-communicate. We've been saying this since day one as well. Over-communicate with your employees, over-communicate with your partners, your vendors, your customers, your banker, your CPA. Over-communicate with everyone. Let them know where you are and where you're going, and do that often so they can be bought in and helpful in moving you through the different stages towards sustained growth. Third is keep your routines in place. You know, there's two kinds of categories of people from a health standpoint that I've observed over the last 6 or so months. There's those that have decided, well, I can't do what I want to do. I don't go to the gym, and so I'm going to eat popcorn and watch Netflix. There's others that have taken that time and built new routines to get really healthy. I encourage you to do the same thing, not only personally, but do the same thing with your business. Find the routines that work for you personally to keep you healthy, focused, energized towards your work. Put those routines in place. Encourage your people to do the same thing and keep the routines in place that you have at work. Leadership meetings, focus meetings, strategy meetings, all of those things need to be in place. And by the way, the most important meeting that you'll have is a one-to-one. Talk to your key people weekly or bi-weekly to check in with them, especially important during this time. Be clear with expectation. Roles and responsibilities cannot be vague or unclear. No nebulosities, as I like to say, during this time. A nebulosity is anything that we say that is unclear or might create some confusion. You know, I hope we can meet our sales goal this month. You know, I think you'll be able to do this. Be crystal clear in your leadership, in your direction, and your communication with them. So you and your team are all moving in unison towards the goals that you want to be towards sustained growth. Capture what's working and what's not. As I mentioned, not everything will. That's okay. You're not going to hit every shot, as Michael Jordan famously said. So keep shooting until you find the ones that work. Be ready when the clouds lift. Now, some might say that the clouds are lifting now. Some might say that we're still months away from that happening. It depends on your industry. It depends on where you are physically. It depends on the factors of where your company is, your competitive landscape. But the clouds will lift in your industry. There's always a recovery to every downturn. It has happened for the history of mankind. It's going to happen now. Be the one that is prepared to lead your team, your company, into that recovery. Don't overlook the opportunities. There's an extraordinary amount of M&A activity going on in the marketplace. A lot of companies didn't survive this and won't survive this. You need to be the one to look for those opportunities, jump in and find them when you can, when it makes sense for your company. Make the best decision to move forward. Invest in what works and don't overlook any opportunity that's out there. The last three I want to emphasize, I think, are the most critical of these. First of all, rebuild your sales and marketing playbooks. I glossed over this earlier, but I want to pause on it for just a minute. The sales playbook you had, the scripts that you had, the pipeline you had, the talk tracks that you had, maybe even the sales people that you had in February, in January, in 2019, that's not going to work in this new environment. Depending on your industry and where you are, you're going to need to make changes. So I want to encourage you to take a hard look at that, maybe find some professional help outside to review your sales playbook and refocus it, re-energize it in a way that's clear to your team and get them moving in the right direction, selling the right products and services with visibility into your pipeline so you know exactly what's happening and where they are. Same thing applies on the marketing playbook. What got you through 2019 is not going to get you through 2020. Find outside help if needed, have internal conversations, reconfigure your marketing approach, and move yourself in the right direction. Invest in people, training, and a culture of accountability. People are actually really hard to find now. There's a lot of people that are still sitting at home because of the extra income that they have. Pull those people off the couch, find the top talent. This is no time for B players. You have to have A players to get full recovery coming out of a crisis. Look at your team, invest in the ones that can succeed, move those aside that can't, and lead forward. Lastly, find your blue ocean. The opportunities are enormous. Figure out what that is, what that looks like for you, and swim there as fast as you can. I think what you'll find is there's a number of amazing success stories if you look back on every downturn, every recession that we've had over the last 50 or 100 years. There's always the blue ocean out there for you. Your job as the CEO and as a leader in your company is to find it and help your company swim there as quickly as you can. Tom, that's what I wanted to run through. I'm happy to answer any questions or see if somebody has a thought.
No, that was a lot of information really, really fast. So we've got a lot of time for Q&A. So I hope that people use the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen to ask some questions. But I'd like to start off with just sort of some basic blocking and tackling. You talked a couple times about the blue ocean strategy. So I know what that is, but I also know that a lot of people may not have read the book. So can you go a little bit deeper into what blue ocean strategy is all about?
Absolutely. The Blue Ocean Strategy book was written, I guess now about 20 or so years ago. The book itself may be a little bit dated. If you pick it up to read it, there is an updated version. But it talks about companies, organizations, even industries that realize, hey, this is where we are right now, and it's very competitive. You know, there's a lot of us, whatever we are, out there. There's a coffee stand on every corner, or a hamburger stand, or PR company, or whatever it is. So you can work to try to differentiate yourself. No question, that's a great way to do it. But beyond that is Blue Ocean. It is literally taking who you are and how you are, the strengths and assets that you have as an individual and within your company. It's taking an industry and breaking it apart to see what's missing. Where's the white space? Where are things not being filled? Where are gaps that you could swim into and fill? And then the Blue Ocean Strategy book is really a playbook to take you through some exercises to surface what those opportunities might be. Once you identify them, it gives you some information on how to build the strategies to execute on that. It's a fantastic, almost iconic book at this point. I strongly recommend people read it.
So another thing is that came up as you talked about sort of sustaining growth. But in these times, that's an area that I think a lot of people are worried about, or maybe their business is in a little bit of a free fall. How can people sustain growth in times like this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We're all facing the same uncertainty. I mean, there's incredible economic uncertainty. There's social unrest. There's obviously the pandemic still going on and could pop back up at any time. There's the election. There's the economy. You just go on and on about uncertainty. I don't know in my lifetime that there's been more uncertainty over the next 6 or 9 or 12 months than there has been over the last couple of months. So with that uncertainty, we have to focus on one key thing, and that is what you can control. What you can control are your own actions, your team's actions and focus and intent, your own investments and what's right in front of you. So as you think about dealing with uncertainty, take as little of the uncertainty, take as much of the uncertainty as you can, and try to break it apart into how that uncertainty, if it goes from this direction or this direction, what does that mean or do to your business? And where could you find a plan A, B, or C that, depending on what happens, you're going to be able to adjust to that? And you go this direction for a period of time and something happens, you've already decided there's 3 options from here. Okay, we're going to zig over here and take this road. I had a lot of member companies that we worked with them back in June and July when school was about to start. That seemed to affect a lot of our businesses and people for that matter. So we built plans. All those plans had 3 paths in them, depending on what was happening. That's the first thing I would tell you that helps with uncertainty. The second thing is you got to just sometimes go for it. Not every decision is going to be a right one, but do your best, have a group of people around you to bounce things off of, get the best advice and resources that you can, and then just make a decision and go for it.
So you talked about that now is the time to lead. What's holding leaders back? Why aren't they leading during these uncertain times?
Yeah, I think there's 3 things. And these are pretty common things, but they're magnified, Tom, as you're in this period. The first one, quite candidly, is fear. It is fear of the unknown. It is fear that we all have as a CEO of an imposter syndrome. Am I really good enough to take my company through this? Do I have the right resources? Do we have the skills, the right team to do this? And fear is that first thing that gets in the way from that. The second one is just simply not knowing what direction to do. Our inclination as a human being is, well, if I don't know where to go, I'm just going to stay where I am. And as I mentioned to you, that is the most dangerous place for a business to be, is to try to stay where you are. And then the third thing is investment capital and having the resources to make changes, whether those resources are people or the financial resources to do that, or the net underneath your business to allow you to, if you fail and fall, to have enough financial strength to weather those storms. A lot of companies didn't make it and won't make it from where we are right now. But I would just tell you one thing. One of my favorite quotes comes from Martin Luther King. It's not a business quote, but it's one that I think really applies in this situation. He famously said years ago, "You're not always going to see the first step, but you have to take it in faith. When you look up, the stairway is going to be cloudy. You won't be able to see what's in front of you, but take the first step in faith." So I would encourage your business owners, the folks in your team, Tom, to really think about what that first step is and begin to take the first and the second and the third to move themselves forward.
So the third step you talked about was investing. But one of the things you and I talked about in sort of the prep for this call is that one of the biggest questions you get from your clients is, how do I know when the right time to invest is? Because obviously there's got to be a sweet spot.
Yeah, there is a sweet spot. And the problem is there is no right answer. There may be a right answer if you look at it in hindsight, right? But sitting here today knowing, should I invest in this person or this new role or this technology to move forward? So I always encourage our members to do a couple things when they think about major decisions like that. First is to write it out and just kind of paint a picture of worst case, best case scenario. So you not know along this gradient, how risky is this decision? Is it kind of risky or not really that risky? And if you really map it out and look at it, most of the times that we think about these things, we're going to realize it's not really as risky as I think it is. Most humans are risk averse to a degree, particularly a business owner that has assets to protect. But if you map it out and really look at it on this gradient, that helps you kind of see where it is. The second thing is talk to smart people about it. Get a peer group around you. Get a small group. You know, I tell our CEOs all the time, you should be meeting at least once or twice a year with your team. Your team should be a CPA, should be a financial planner, and it should be an attorney. And if you have those folks around you, added in a banker and a couple other financial people that can give you some advice, that's your advisory board, if you will. Take the decisions that you need to make to them. Find other groups of CEOs that are facing same decisions and bounce these ideas off them. And then the third thing is look historically, think back on the decisions that you make. So a lot of times we don't remember the risky decisions or even the crazy decisions that we've made in the past. But if you take a minute and reflect on those, what we'll usually find is that, you know what, it kind of worked out okay, or the downside wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
So we have a question in the chat, and Jim asks, do you find that your CEO clients, do they have a tendency or maybe a little bit of a tenacity towards avoiding asking for assistance? And would they sort of prefer to fix the problems themselves? Or are they not going outside of their own self?
That is a great question. And, you know, spending 1,000 hours listening to CEOs, I get to take off what I call the CEO mask. And the CEO mask that many of us wear is, ask any CEO, how's it going? And their first answer is, it's fine. Everything's great. Got it all under control. No problems. No matter what's really happening. You know, my job with questions is to take the mask off and find out what's really going on. So, Jim, I appreciate that question. There's a couple things that I would encourage you to think about in this. One is, the answer to your question is yes. CEOs are afraid of revealing what's truly going on. They don't want to really look at the numbers. They just kind of peek at them with one eye. They don't want to face reality. Max Dupree, a great author in one of my favorite little leadership books, Leadership is an Art, begins the book by saying, the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. So challenge yourself, challenge the others around you on your team, challenge your advisory board, peers around you, to challenge you to define reality in your situation. You can't make good decisions unless you know what reality is. And secondly, there's a level of humility here. Jim Collins says the strongest trait that any CEO or leader needs is humility. And we have to have the humility to kind of be authentic and share with others where we really are. Because if we're making decisions in a vacuum by ourselves, if we're just relying on ourselves only, the chances of making a wrong decision are much, much greater than if you have a peer group or advisors or those around you that are challenging you with that.
So you work with a lot of companies in the Austin and San Antonio area. I know you work with people all over the country, but you work with a lot of local companies. Have you seen any companies or CEOs that you can talk about where you say, wow, they're doing a good job at all of this?
Yeah, there's one I like to talk about a lot. There's a music retailer here in San Antonio. It's a fourth generation family member for this 85-year-old business. And the CEO is 31 years old, young man. He and his brother and his aunt bought the business recently. And, you know, when this pandemic hit in late February and in March, and the city mandated that they close their physical locations, Zach and his team were really devastated, as we all were. And I kind of rushed to him. We had Zoom calls and phone calls for hours, really trying to think about what's the strategy to navigate this. Well, there's two things that Zach had in his favor. First was, over the last year, he had invested very heavily in infrastructure to allow him to sell online. And at this time, his income that he was receiving, his revenue from the online part of his business, was fairly small. But he had people advising him over the last year, this is an area to invest in and to strengthen. And he had taken that advice and he had done it. Long-term thinking, executed ahead of the pandemic, put him in a situation where the second advantage that he had was to capture that, and he was able to take his team, refocus them. And I'm happy to report that instead of having a 50% decline in his revenue, which is really what we expected for March, April, May, June, and beyond, that's what we had planned for. He has had, in April, he was flat from the same month prior year. In May, he was up about 10%. In June and July, he's had some of the best months that they've had in company history. So that's just an example of the type of leadership that leans back on the planning, the outside resources and advice that we get. Build it, take it, administer it into your business, and then when tough times come, leverage those resources to push yourself forward into accelerated and sustainable growth. So Zach's a great example of that.
Well, and one of the things you talked about in your main body of your presentation was about taking advantage of M&A opportunities. And of course, that's something we focus on here at ACG. But how in these times do you even find the right M&A opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reality is that a lot of business owners, kind of going back to Jim's question, are tucking themselves internally and they're keeping their cards close to their vest. That said, if you're looking for M&A opportunities, start with your competition. You're going to know your industry and your competition the best. And I like to look at outside resources, maybe talk to vendors, other people in business. A great resource for this are commercial real estate brokers, obviously bankers and CPAs, just kind of about what the buzz is out there. And you might be able to identify a competitor that's a little weaker than they want to be. And that might create an M&A opportunity to partner with them or acquire them and fold them into your business. The second thing I would think about is looking at your suppliers, your vendors, those that are around you, and see if they have information or if they themselves could be a target acquisition for you. Again, depending on the type of industry that you're in. And then the third thing is, I have a rule of life. My dad taught me a bunch of rules of life, but one of them, rule number 17, is it never hurts to ask. And so it's crazy as it sounds, I like to just simply knock on a door, virtually, and say, hey, this has been a very tough year. We've been fortunate to be in a strong position. I'm curious, how are you doing? And is there something we might be able to do to help you or partner with you? You would be surprised the number of people that just kind of raise their hand and look for that. Now, all of that said, Tom, there's a number of companies that are putting themselves up for sale. My sources in this area tell me that around February is going to be when there's going to be the most M&A opportunity. The better deals, however, are going to be now if you can surface them.
So, Tom, I really appreciate you spending this time with us today and sort of going through all this. In just a minute, I'm going to give you kind of a chance for last words, but then we're going to switch platforms. We're going to go over to a Zoom webinar platform where we can have our couple of rounds of networking. One of the reasons we do it this way is that webinar works great for the presentation, but Zoom meetings works great for the networking. So just so everybody who's paying attention, in your email that you got confirming your participation today, there is a second link that will take you to the Zoom meeting where the networking will take place in just a minute. And also Sarah has posted the link in the chat area, so you can go up and click on that. But Tom, before we go, what are your final thoughts? What's your last piece of advice for the ACG audience?
Well, first of all, Tom, I just want to thank you guys for inviting me in and just encourage you guys in a couple of ways. First of all, the clouds are going to lift. Don't forget, the sun will come out tomorrow, as Annie likes to say, right? It's a very difficult and depressing time for many people, both personally and professionally. So just know that it's going to get better, lift your heads up, and be the kind of leader that helps people think about moving forward. Secondly, protect your business, and while you're doing that, lift your head up, look around, and find the blue ocean and the opportunities that are there. And then the third thing, and I say this to every CEO that I work with, have candid, open, and clear conversations with the most important people in your life, personally and professionally. Let them know legitimately how you're feeling. Ask with great curiosity, how are they doing? And strengthen the relationships in your life. That will not only strengthen your business, but it'll create great value for you personally.
And people can find you at tomcuthbert.com. Is that right?
TomCuthbert.com. Happy to chat. There's a link to set a call with me, so I'll be happy to follow up with anybody.
Awesome. So if you want to know more about Tom, you can find him at his website. I assume he'll also be open to you reaching out to him on LinkedIn. So at this time, go find that link. I'll be there in just a minute, and we will launch over to the networking portion of today's meeting. Thanks for being in this part to everybody.
Thank you.